Anita did a great job of summing up
the need for talking about our strategic plan and our budget, which we're actually meeting. Our first of a few budget meetings is tonight, and I'm really excited to be talking about that. And it is, I know budget can be rather boring, but it's exciting when you have the election that we recently had and a change in direction for our city council. So that's what we're going to dive into. I'm just going to, I promise I'm not going to make this too boring, even though we're talking about budget, and I'm going to leave some time at the end for a few questions. And I did actually already receive a few questions I'll address towards the end of this. So just real quick, as we look into the 2026 budget, we're at $314.8 million for that budget. And believe it or not, that is a 12% decrease from this year's budget, or the 2025 budget of $359 million. That seems like a lot of money, but a big part of that are big capital projects, right? Community rec center, our procedural wastewater treatment. So a lot of that is bond revenue that that money comes into our budget. So in general, when you think about the city budget, think about $250 million, $250 million bare bones. Like, so a council member is going to handle, say, $1 billion within the 4 years that they're on. But this year, we really put it to our city manager, Mike Bennett, who's doing a good job to say, hey, we really need to focus on core services, which brings me to our 5 pillars of our strategic plan. I have so much joy about this, having conservative values and thinking about what the proper role of government is. Going into our strategic planning session, that was my framework, right? And those were the conversations we're having. What should the city be doing? So without further ado, our number one pillar within our 5 pillars of our strategic plan are core services. So we're focusing on what the city should be doing. This is police, fire, streets, utilities, and parks, with a really strong focus. A little biased towards the police department, but in our response, our first responders, and making sure that we are adequately meeting the needs of our community. But then again, also maintaining what we have. We don't need to build so many new amenities. How do we make sure that the streets that we have are well taken care of, well maintained? So that when we're talking about core services, that's that function. That also includes your utility services, your water and sewer and all that type of thing. Housing. So housing affordability, and this was actually one of the questions I received right before the meeting, was related to this. But housing affordability, this is a tough thing for us to really solve. It's a national problem. It's not just a Grand Junction problem, but an important thing to take into consideration is the city's role and what do we have control over, and what are we doing that is getting in the way of affordable housing. And a lot of that is the red tape, right? It's the person that wants to build a subdivision, and it takes them 18 to 24 months to get through the planning department, right? That's real money. That's real cost. I see Cindy nodding her head. I mean, and for those that are there's some people there's a few folks left on council that lean the other way, and they were kind of they were basically saying that, well, yeah, if we save them any money, these developers are just going to put that money in their pocket. That's not true, right? They know that, hey, for me to be out and working on this project, I need to make a certain amount of money, but all the costs are being passed on to that end consumer, whether it's a build to rent or a build to buy. So that's a significant cost. So we're trying to reduce regulatory barriers that are slowing these projects down. So that was the second. So first policy, first pillar, core services and housing, fiscal policy and position. So this is really about protecting taxpayers, right? So tell me if any of this sounds familiar. But we're talking about the city needs to be paying attention to our costs that are increasing based on inflation and labor costs and all that type of thing. But how do we make good choices that will that help us to be responsible? So we're trying to avoid new debt. We're trying to invest conservatively, and we're also careful of those one-time funds that we get in, such as the ARPA funding that we received a few years ago, to where that creates those additional commitments, right? That expectation from nonprofits. I spent an hour right before I came here this morning with the new head of, or one of the new heads for Homeward Bound, and really talked to them really frankly about the struggles that the city's had with that organization in particular. And I didn't pull any punches. It's like, here's the issue, right? Here's the problem. But let's move on to fourth pillar, government transparency and accountability. This is more than just making sure everything's up on the website, right? This is actually, how do we make ourselves available to the community? We have a Meet You There initiative, which is really about getting out and being in the community and making ourselves accessible. Because if you've ever wanted to talk to a city council member, right? Well, yeah, you can come have coffee with me a couple times a week. My friend Tom does. And I've seen some of the rest of you there, but it's more than that, right? It's like, how do we make sure that we're accessible? Because when you go to a city council meeting, there's a chance you might get up and stand for 3 minutes and talk at us. We're not responding, right? Or you go to a workshop meeting and you can listen, but you're not engaging. But to have meaningful conversations with our community about their government, I think is important. And that really also comes back to that accountability. So how do we use data and track our results so that we can actually be accountable and build trust within our community? And finally, that fifth pillar is government efficiency. So cutting waste, modernizing systems, automating what we can. This is about right-sizing things within the city. One example that we're actually partnering with the county on is really trying to streamline our permitting process and our building process. Some of those systems will involve AI, which is a pilot project. I know pilot project isn't the most favorite word around Grand Junction, but it was used and abused on 4th and 5th. But I think there's that's an opportunity for us to streamline process. So that's a lot about the budget, and kind of our approach this year is much different, right? Our approach with the strategic plan from a few years ago, and admittedly, I didn't know what I didn't know when I ran for council the first time. I just really wanted to be on council. It sounded like a great thing. I love my city, right? But honestly, I didn't realize when we went through that strategic plan, the first strategic plan I went through 2 years ago, I didn't realize, oh yeah, placemaking, we should be sustainable. All these words have meanings and they have consequences, right? And that's why this time we really leaned in to those 5 pillars. You know, that's what our community deserves, right? That type of government, rather than just kind of that feel good that's put out there in a way that just allows the government to grow bigger and bigger and spend more and more, because that is what has been happening in Grand Junction. So along those lines, I do want to dive into something else, and this is our comp plan. And this is really, I've heard Diane say, I was in the room when we were talking about this, and of course, apparently Scott Baufuss was too. He told me the other day. Apparently, it's a democratic process, right? But I will tell you, based on my experience, what I've learned in the short amount of time I've been in city council is that we hire a lot of consultants and we pay them a lot of money. For instance, a design for Whitman Park that cost us $130,000 that we're not going to use, right? And thank goodness Mike Bennett came along before the next payment went out for $500,000, right? For a design that included a synthetic skate park or a skating rink and a dog park. And it's like, there is so much of that. But here's where the really bad thing happens when it comes to policy, is that you might have a staff member that has a certain idea of what they want, of kind of that result that they want. The consultant that gets hired matters a lot. So when you have a comp plan that's 400 pages or whatever it is, there's things that are baked into it that you might not otherwise know, right? Same with bike and ped, same with sustainability. Like I read, like bike and ped plan was one of the first things that I was on council for. And I'm like, yeah, of course. We want people to be safe on bikes, right? As a police officer, I had investigated a fatal bike crash, and that meant a lot to me. Like I thought about blood on the pavement. We need to make responsible decisions to make sure that we're keeping people safe. However, in that plan, there's concepts like complete streets, which mandate that every street we touch, not just new streets, every street we touch, like 4th and 5th, are going to have these multimodal components that are very, very expensive, right? So how do we navigate that? And I'm going to jump into the comp plan just a little bit. And if you read the Sentinel here recently, there was some talk about our comp plan and, we're going to leave it alone for another couple of years. I don't know that that's the case. I'm going to keep pushing that we change it sooner than later, because there's a lot in the comp plan, in addition to the complete streets mandates, so that require these projects to accommodate all modes of transportation regardless of context. And this is a blanket approach. It costs us lots of money. But there's smaller things like the engineering standards we use. So they say, well, let's go to, instead of using AASHTO, which is a national transportation engineering standard that's widely accepted, they go to NACTO. It seems like a small change, right? And the layperson is going to be like, meh, right? So what? NACTO is an advocacy group for multimodal transportation. That's what we're building. That's what our standards are coming through right now. And so as we're getting ready to issue another $20 million in bonds for these big transportation projects, that concerns me greatly about how are these projects being designed. So even though the taxpayers have already approved this money, do we maybe hold off and say, you know what, we're not going to approve issuing these bonds, or this next $20 million in bonds for these transportation projects, until we fix these policies. So NACTO, NACTO, I believe it is, versus AASHTO. Yeah, a quick Google search will get you well on your way with that. So sustainability mandates far beyond federal law, state and federal law. So these are goals that talk about like carbon neutrality, renewable energy mandates that exceed the state and federal requirements. This is your city. This is Grand Junction that's doing this. Reduction in vehicle miles traveled, VMT. And these all drive up costs. These are significant drivers of your tax dollars just continuing to get chewed up. So what can we do if we just get back to basics, right? Pull a lot of that out. And not to say that we can't do these things, not to say that we're not going to do a multimodal project, but let's give our staff the room to operate and not require them on every single project to do that. So I'm gonna pop through these because I do want to leave time for questions. So placemaking with ideological emphasis. This is really trying to influence culture through design, public art, programming, minimum density requirements for all rezones. This gets to one of the questions I'm going to address here at the end about housing. Blanket multimodal requirements we touched on. Policies targeting vehicle use reduction. For instance, on page 66 of our plan says, reducing single occupancy vehicle trips and vehicle miles traveled, VMT, through transportation demand management strategies and multimodal investments. That's a government trying to control the way you get around. Right? Exactly. So
unless you're the elitist, and then you can travel however.
Right. So yeah, you take your Learjet. So the point is that we need to be very honest about what we're doing. And when we have these big plans that are put together by these consultants, right, that have an agenda, we need to make sure that we're breaking them down and finding this stuff and really discovering, hey, what's in here? What's baked into this that's bad for our community? And there is more and more of it as you dig in further and further. So we'll get into this. Underground utilities, it's nice, it's expensive, right? When a developer has to underground not only their own utilities, but utilities next to their property that they don't have anything to do with, right? And that's the kind of thing that the city was pushing forward. Green infrastructure management, significant trees, landscaping management, energy codes beyond state requirements, let's see, transportation demand, housing, diversity requirements without market analysis, scenic corridor restrictions, cultural programming, core city function, and historic preservation. So these are all significant. And this is an email. These are all kind of from an email that I sent to your council during our meeting, our last workshop, which really got a lot of people fired up. especially a few of them. But there was the pushback from Scott Biofist, who said this was a democratic process. I was there, and it's like, you can't tell me that this was something that people knew was baked into this plan, right? Like fourth and fifth, right? But just like with our with fourth and fifth, right, where they said it was all about safety, and it just wasn't, right? It's about kind of manipulating the information so you get the results you want. The issue for me, and again, complete streets. Complete streets approach. This is from our comp plan. The complete streets approach will be implemented over time with roadway projects that include all new construction, reconstruction, and significant transportation improvements. Roadways shall safely accommodate all modes of travel and all users regardless of age and ability. That's really expensive, right? And I'm not against multimodal. Hear me on this. I am working actively with GVIC about how do we create bike and pedestrian transportation through our community in canal roadways in partnership. Not a, hey, you're going to do this because we said so, but how can we work together, right? That's the approach. Instead of just these mandates that come on hard. There's another reference to complete streets. Every street, and this is every street, and they'll accommodate all users, pedestrians, bicyclists, transits, and vehicles, regardless of context. Page 88 says, promote carbon neutrality by 2040 through local renewable energy mandates not required by state and federal law. Literally in our comp plan. Goes on. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. All planning initiatives must actively address racial inequity and systematic discrimination through targeted community design. Seriously, this is what, now in my recent conversation, I personally will tell you, I believe that DEI is discriminatory on its face, right? So thankfully, our federal government also says it's discriminatory. And they have said, if you want FAA grants, and we have received I think $58 million at the airport this year. If you want FAA grants, you can't have DEI policies. So that's one of the things that we're cleaning up. So it is significant. It's nice to have the federal perspective as well to help us out there. Placemaking and ideological emphasis. So this is from page 132. Placemaking efforts should foster community identity, promote social equity, and encourage cultural expression through design, public art, and programming. That's not proper role of government in my book. But this is so. And the reason I bring this to you is this was in 2020. This wasn't this council, right? But when you think about the folks that were on, there were some good people on council, right? But when you get a document this thick and you have this hidden down somewhere in the document, they don't have the benefit of being able to use AI like I do, right? So how do you dig this stuff out? How do you find it, right? And if you just even if you find one, how do you find the other 20 bad things? But that's where we're at. It's so important that we control our consultants and what they bring forward to us. We have in our sustainability plan, literally our current plan was designed by a Denver, what they call themselves a boutique engineering firm, who did the sustainability plan and greenhouse gas assessment, right, for city and county of Boulder. They did Hawaii. They did some others, right? So within their plan, they were telling us to get rid of our compressed natural gas buses because they weren't efficient enough. Compressed natural gas that we are creating from our own wastewater treatment plant, right, isn't green enough for them. They want us to buy EV buses to the tune of $1 million each. Never mind the damage that EVs do to other countries, right? To where, the slave labor, the strip mining, and all the other bad things. But I digress. Policies, again, I think we talked about, vehicle miles traveled, VMT. Green infrastructure management, incorporate green infrastructure. This is page 92. Incorporate green infrastructure into all development projects to manage stormwater and promote sustainability. So great if we're managing stormwater, but that sustainability is a big word, right? And I'm not just talking about the number of letters in it. I'm just talking about what it bleeds over into and what people think that it permits them to do. A couple more quick things. Public art and requirements for private development. Private development, if you're doing the development, you should be making the decision, right? What you're going to do with your project. And historic preservation requirements, where feasible, this is fine, but these are, again, more mandates. So I will leave you with this before we get into some questions, is I'm pushing forward a policy around consultants. Who we hire, how we hire, that type of thing, and when we can avoid that. And so many of our projects, because of the democratic process, right? You have those same folks that really get involved, and they leave a lot of comments on Engaged GJ. So you really feel like, oh, well, hey, there's a lot of support for this. We don't know if it's the same person that made all these comments, right? But our new city manager had a great idea, right? We have every resident's address, right? We know where people live. Why wouldn't we use technology, send them a survey that's 1 per household or 2 per household, depending on, to where we actually verify this is the person that lives here and this is the feedback, right? So you don't get those smaller special interest groups that are very, very motivated to push their agenda, right? So how do we manage that? So that's one of the areas that we're doing that. And then if we can avoid hiring these large consulting firms from these, very progressive cities that are really trying to put these little bits of information in that will eventually come to bite us. We're talking about a 2020 comp plan here, 2020. And all of these things are baked right in there. So it's kind of a gotcha, right? So what are we doing to ourselves? What are we doing to those future councils? What do they have to navigate? So I'm hoping that we can do a better job with that. Now, I did get a couple of questions, and I want to start out with those. Here we go. Okay, so the question I received was basically around, let's see, where are we at? Okay, so 4th and 5th Street. There's a question about why are the markings still on 4th and 5th Street? You can kind of see that there's still some paint right on there from where it was before. One of the issues there has been cost, right? And and yes, it would look better if we completely reblacked all those streets and made them all brand new, so we could forget that 4th and 5th Street at the same time, or you could just notice it and say, hey, look, there's a win, right? But I would say that it comes down to cost, right? Reblacking the cities, so basically, or reblacking the streets is expensive. It's like painting the streets. It's not exactly it's not going through and chip sealing it. It's a reblack. So think about it, asphalt friendly paint for painting that whole thing and then restriping it. So they didn't go to the extent that they could have to make those roads look completely fresh. So that's there. And I'm okay with that.
But one comment on that is just I've noticed a lot of confusion, especially with older drivers, even with the
That's fair. That's fair. So yeah, that's something that we can, I can share that with the right people. Now the other thing, the other question I received here was about housing, right? So we're seeing a lot of apartment complexes being built. Not everybody's favorite. I'd rather live in a single family home. I'm biased towards single family homes. I want to support the single family homes because, quite frankly, that's how people build generational wealth. That's how they create financial independence. That's how they control their costs as rents keep going up. They own a house, they're in more control of their financial futures. Now, it's also important to realize as you think about our community that when you can put 200 apartments in about 3 or 4 acres versus, let's say, 4 homes to an acre, and you want 200 residences, that's a lot of sprawl, right? And so how do we balance that? Workforce housing is super important. Like how do we allow people that work in our community to live in our community? Now, I say that knowing full well that some of these market rate apartments are $1,800, $2,000 a month for like a studio apartment. So I get that too. And I also get that we being the city subsidize certain projects, even some market rate projects, but really projects like the Liberty Apartments that are we're trying to get in down on Orchard Mesa, which is Capital A affordable housing, and Salt Flats project, another Capital A affordable housing. And I know my conservative friends will ask me, "Hey, about proper role of government. What are you doing? Why is the city of Grand Junction so deeply involved in developing this housing?" And a lot of it comes down to saying to be economically successful, we need more housing. And that's something that we got great feedback. I'm on the Grand Junction Economic Partnership Board, and we brought in some site finders from around the country that do work around the world. That question, or you give me 5 minutes? Okay, so you can also give me a 5 minute sign if you want. So, but these site finders said, "Hey, this is an amazing place. It's beautiful, like all kinds of recreational amenities. The problem is for the wages that we would look to bring into this community, they can't afford housing, right? And that's also why we lose so many of our young people as they graduate from college or high school, and they go other places and don't come back because it's expensive to live here. So, like, how do we find that balance, right? So reducing red tape is a big part of that. And trying to increase efficiency. We have started this council. When I say this council, I think you know what I mean. This council has pushed forward for a housing affordability task force, which myself and a couple other council members sit on as more observers. But what makes this group, this task force, different from anything else that's happened before is that it is staff supported but industry led. Right? So this isn't staff saying, "Hey, give us a bunch of input. We're going to kind of comb this over and decide what we want to bring back to council." This is council and staff listening to our builders, developers, engineers saying, "This is what's getting in the way of us building. These are the things that need to be fixed within our transportation engineering design standards, TEDs. This is what needs to be fixed within our zoning development code. This is how we can build more affordable housing, bringing in more online." So that kind of efficiency is important. Gets back to our strategic plan. Catherine.
Can you give some specific examples of what City Council has done to encourage private industry to build worker housing and affordable single family housing?
So my hope is that the result of this task force, Housing Affordability Task Force, does that exactly. Because as of yet, those policies haven't changed. So until we make those changes within zoning and development code, until we make those changes within our transportation engineering design standards, and until we improve the processes, then we haven't changed anything yet. We haven't made that more accessible, right? So that we're working on and we're working towards. My hope is that we'll implement kind of the low-hanging fruit, the ideas that are brought forward that we can implement within planning right away, which they are, like, our builders are saying, "Hey, here are some issues that are really hanging us up. These pre-application reviews are taking up a ton of our time, and we're kind of going back and forth, and we're not getting anything done. And sometimes before a developer even buys a property, they have to do a bunch of paperwork. They may spend $5,000 or $6,000, and then they may decide not to do it. So these are expenses, and these are things that take time that maybe we can streamline. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about the comp plan. Is the comp plan an ordinance, or is it a guideline? What is it? Is it written in stone? Is it flexible?
Yeah. So
The reason I asked is because Steve and I sit on Mesa County Planning Commission, and on the Planning Commission, it is our job to create and approve the master plan for the county. And from where we sit, we use that as a guideline. It's not written in stone. And we can change it. And we can change it very easily. So is your comp plan written in stone, or can council make a decision and change anything they want in that comp plan?
That's a great question. At the end of the day, council can make the decision, right? So the question is,
At the end of the day, it's
the
what?
council can make the decision, right? So good question. And when we get feedback from our planning commission, right? Planning commission is reviewing something, we're gonna do a rezone. And they say, hey, this complies with our comprehensive plan and it meets these other 4 requirements. That comprehensive plan alignment is important to us and it's important to our planning commission, right? So can we direct to go in another direction as we have with our strategic plan? Literally our city manager, like if you read his preamble, you can go on the Grand Junction agenda for tonight and look at his look at his letter that basically is the introduction to our budget meeting for tonight. Talks about being aligned with our strategic plan. It doesn't talk about being aligned with the comprehensive plan, but it's very important because our staff uses that as a guideline, right? So when they're
Well,
gonna,
that's part of the problem. I was gonna address that later after the meeting. I just went through, it was a year and a half ago, and we got a comp plan change and a rezone out by the old Safeway on the residence.
Yeah.
I don't know, you were on council there. I don't know if you were present or not. But everyone, the whole process through staff, you can't do it. It'll never happen. And we said, well, it's the smart thing to do. So us old guys, we just kept marching forward.
yeah,
And we did get approved. It was a 6-1 vote.
yeah,
And so, but everybody along the way, even the planners, outside planners, told us, you'll never get this done.
yeah.
And so I don't see why you just can't wave your magic wand and say, we're not gonna do that.
Well, and that's exactly. I actually ended up having. I had during our last council workshop. I put that forward, and I sent an email that had all this stuff in it that I've been sharing with you guys. And I should have done a little more homework with a couple of members of council, one in particular, to encourage her to be more supportive of that idea, and kind of warn her because there's a lot of moving parts and there was a lot of reading I gave people like during the meeting. Bam, here's like a 5-page memo. But to really, I am not giving up on changing the comp plan. The comp plan needs significant changes. It needs to align with our strategic plan. It needs to align with the will of this council. So I'm going to continue to push for that. My hope is that I can put forward something as a council that we put together a resolution that says complete streets out, right? Something as simple as that, so that we can take not only the comp plan where it has that and basically line through it, delete it, but also the individual standalone complete streets policy that we have, and also the references to it within our sustainability plan and within our bike and ped plan. Because it's not just in one place. They put these landmines everywhere within policy. So again, this is why devil's in the details. This is why we're having this conversation. And this is why when I see you, Nova, I'll grab you next. This is why when people were like, hey, 4th and 5th, got that changed, way to go. Like, that is tip of the iceberg. That is tip of the iceberg. That's the little part you see. The important part and the real work that your council needs to do is in policy. And it is difficult and it is arduous to dig all this stuff out and try to figure out how do we fix this? How do we right this ship? Nova.
So I went to the Parade of Homes this last weekend, and I went through every single house, and I almost always speak to the builder. And what I heard over and over and over again was state standards changing, forcing electric only, forcing airtight, locked up units of no airflow. So they have to install units to circulate the air, so we don't die. Just saying things over and over from all of the builders. So what can you guys do and what can we do to push back on the state to help move this? And are you able to supersede the state regulation within the city of Grand Junction? Or you have to live within that? And I mean, what's your recommendation?
Well, we need to be fighting the state all the time, right? Right now, some of the unfunded mandates that are coming down, they're going to hurt us bad. I just one example off the top of my head is Regulation 31, if you're familiar with that. It's a methane reduction for landfills, and it will devastate our landfill. Like in the first year when I was talking to Cody Davis about it, he's like, that's literally, it'll cost us $9 million, and that's our entire reserve. You're bankrupt the landfill in the first year. So I don't know if the folks in Denver just want you to burn your trash in your backyard or dump it on the desert. I figure it's one of those two, right? Because that's the issue. But Nova, you're right. It's a matter of emailing, calling, testifying where you can at the state level, because those impacts locally are significant. And obviously, make sure you're active at that state level, supporting good candidates everywhere you can. So yes, good question.
We have to try to flip candidates across the state because our representation on the western slope is excellent and it's not on the other side. So we've got
Yeah.
to start reaching across the aisle.
Yeah.
To
I was in Denver, and I was having a conversation with Colorado Oil and Gas about some of the regulations that they were pushing, and it just felt like, as I was there, I'm like, and assume I'm pointing north here, it's like everything is this way. You guys have completely forgot about this, right? East and west, but it's all that I-20, and I know Janice knows this. I don't know, I honestly, and my sincere appreciation to our state reps. I don't know how our fantastic state reps do what they do day in and day out. I did have a couple years where I was kind of a minority voice, so I know that can be frustrating. It's a lot more fun when you have people that vote with you. So, right. Yes.
I'm just gonna stand over here. I'm Trish Weber and I'm on the Board of Health. And we run into a lot of these same problems. The state tends to drive what your plan is gonna be. And for instance, we have a high suicide rate in Mesa County. We also happen to have a high gun ownership rate. And so the conclusion came out that we must have a high suicide rate in men because we own more guns. Yeah, one can be true and the other can be true, but that doesn't mean one causes the other. But the fact they left out is men are more violent when they attempt suicide than women are. So men will try to shoot themselves or drive off the road or do something that really is successful, and women will take an overdose, which can often be reduced. So that's one problem. But we're also in a budget shortfall because we have all these funds that are going away and have to cut $1 million for our county. But what I'm finding the state doing, and maybe Janice could talk about this more, is there's a lot of unfunded mandates. Child care for everybody is an unfunded mandate that we have to do some things with in Mesa County and other things. But the state just seems to ignore the laws they don't want to follow in time. And if we have an unfunded mandate, we can't fund it.
Right. Right. Yeah. Those mandates should come with funding, right?
So one more question.
All right. Do I have any more questions before I take off? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. When the question a couple before about what has the city done to help, and as somebody that worked in development construction for a lot of years, along with Diane and others, it seems like you've done a lot of good things with increasing density. And like if you look at all these apartment buildings going up and other things, you may not like them if they're in your backyard, but I give the city kudos for that because otherwise you don't have lower priced housing, if you don't get some options. And even in some of the subdivisions, I mean, we're in a state of fact that a lot of other things are increasing costs. So it makes it hard to see that difference, but there's definitely a better, so I've seen that over the years.
Thank you. And one other important consideration is, and granted, I will tell you, I'm a capitalist, right? I believe that people should be able to go out and build and do what they want and create what they want to create. When it's their own property, their own funding, they should have that freedom. And that's, when a developer comes to Grand Junction or is in Grand Junction and says, hey, I bought this piece of land, I want to build this thing here. Great. How do we get out of the way? So we want to keep the feel of Grand Junction, but we have to balance that, right? How do we find that balance where we're encouraging growth, right, and development, but we're not just saying that anything can go anywhere. So yeah, that's a tough one. And certainly Planning Commission, like that's something that they have to be thinking about all the time when they get those applications. How does it fit with the bigger plan? So thank you.
I don't have a hook, so I'll just keep moving closer.
Keep moving closer. All right.
Let's thank our mayor.
And if you do have additional questions, Cody is very accessible. And you can also have a broad conversation with him typically Tuesday and Thursday mornings, 9 a.m. down at Montpelier Roasted. And if you follow him or you're friends with him on Facebook, he'll let you know if something's come up. But he's pretty regular about making that commitment. So if you want to have more conversation with our mayor, he is walking the walk. He's not just talking the talk. He is accessible to you. So I'll turn it back over to Carla at this point.